Hey everyone, welcome to the Underswell. I'm Derek Sabori. Thanks for being here. All right, well, we're live, Milka. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Derek?
I'm doing good. I'm excited. It's Friday. Happy Friday. Thanks for joining me today.
Friday.
Friday. That's right. I'm excited to have a conversation with you. You and I had been chatting for a while. We tried to have, another version of a conversation before. And so this is like coming back and we're finally settled in. We got our date. We're live here. We're going to have a great conversation about all the work you're doing, the work you've done, your career journey. You ready for it?
Yes, I am. I feel good.
Well, today I am here with Milka Milliance, founder and CEO of Simetras. You're a founder, you're a consultant, you're a coach, you're an entrepreneur, you're an author, you're a whole bunch of different things, Milka. But I want to start off at just, where are you dialing in from right now? Where's home for you?
Home right now is Miami. So I'm in between Miami and Fort Lauderdale.
Nice. How are things out in Miami today?
It's sunny. It's nice. I'm actually looking out the window and I'm looking at the beach. So I feel like I can't complain too much.
No complaints. And I feel like Miami is often sunny, right? So that you have like the California curse that we have too. People are like, oh, wow. So sorry that you're out there in Southern California.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, what's keeping you busy these days, Milka? What's on your mind? I know you've got a new venture that you just launched, but what's keeping you busy these days?
Yeah, there's a lot going on right now. I actually just a few months ago, I launched in my third company. And I just got back 2 weeks ago from a conference that I attended. I was one of the exhibitors in Vegas. And so there's a lot going on right now. It feels good, but it's a lot when you're ramp up mode. It's just a lot of work getting a third brand started.
Yeah, they're not three brands simultaneously running, are they? Or
No.
This is a new venture.
It's a new venture. I closed down the last two over the course of the last 10 years. So this is just my third entrepreneurial venture, basically.
Can we stop on that for a second? Because I think part of being an entrepreneur, I have a venture that I had to close down, and that's tough. And I mean, we did it for about 7 years or so. It was a clothing brand. And there are lessons that you learn, but it's really tough to let go. It's humbling. I wonder, does it get easier on your third one? Because, no matter what, I think you have to fail. We all fail. And then it's like we learn, and maybe not even fail is the wrong word, but it's like, okay, well, that didn't quite work the way I thought, or I'm going to pivot. So what have you learned from those three different ventures? Do you go into this with a new mindset?
Yes, definitely a new mindset, but there's also certain principles that I've learned that I've taken over to the work that I'm doing now. So I don't see them as failures. I see them, I've constantly pivoted. And I feel like that's really been one of the characterizing features of my career is that I'm constantly pivoting, but there are certain core skill sets and certain competencies, things that I know are strengths of mine that I constantly lean on. And so that's really how I've approached it. And I would say, in the past, this time around, one of the biggest, there have been a few lessons I've learned over the years.
Let's talk through them.
Yeah, but definitely one of the lessons I learned after my first venture was the importance of branding. I feel like I didn't give that enough consideration the first time. Having been a consultant that I'd worked for multiple large firms, very well-known brands, but I was just, starting off on my own. And I struggled in the beginning with balancing self-branding and also the branding of the business. And I feel now, 10 years later, I'm approaching things much differently and with much more certainty and conviction around how I build my brand and also how it fits with the market as well. And also stays true to my own it stays authentic to me, so I don't feel like it's a departure from how I want to show up in the marketplace.
Branding is an important one. I feel like when I did mine, we put a lot of effort into branding. So that wasn't our area, but our area was I don't think we left enough for marketing and advertising and truly getting the word out back to that beautiful brand, to get eyeballs on that beautiful brand. Yeah. What have you learned there?
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure. Also marketing. There's this long list.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, this time around, I actually am working with a marketing firm, and they're helping to bring all of that together, and for us to really not just have a nice brand, but to be able to reach the market in a way that allows them to better understand like what it is that we're doing that's different. Like, what's our unique value proposition as a business? And so, so for me, it's been such a journey. Like, and I've also, the service delivery part as a consultant has never been challenging because this is what I've always done. Like, right, I go into an organization, I try to understand what's going on, and then I make recommendations and I help them develop a solution. That's never been the challenge, but it's the more the go-to-market that's been, I think for me, the steepest learning curve during the last few years, for sure.
Yeah, well, you sent me your value proposition, your unique value proposition. You empower people, managers, and leaders to build unstoppable teams with innovative, actionable strategies for team building, leadership growth, and unforgettable offsites that engage, inspire, and transform teams. Okay. Tell me a little bit about Simetras. Simetras.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Simetras. Thank you. Yes. I even checked before we came on, so sorry about that. But you're designing immersive experiences for team offsites. You're blending leadership development methods to foster collaboration, engagement, and employee retention. So why retreats? How'd you land here?
You said it so well.
Yeah,
you said it so well. Listen, retreats, because I have felt for a long time that leaders have, we need to rethink the way we come together. We need to rethink how we do learning. We need to rethink how we think about people's career trajectories and their growth. And so for me, retreats was really an opportunity to take a step back and be more, to really think more strategically about how do you actually build teams in a way that's more intentional? How do you do it in a way that not only brings people together, but allows them to learn in the moment, and you're able to take a lot of those learnings and the insight and bring them back to the organization afterward. And I know a lot of organizations now are leaning heavily into AI. For a long time, they've been leaning more heavily into more digital solutions, and that's fine. I think there's a place for that. But I also know there's a place for in-person interactions. People still need to interact with each other. They need to still be able to see each other's humanity. And I think retreats, especially when you are in hybrid or remote teams, or you don't get to see each other very often, like, back at 30 years ago or 20 years ago, we know that now there is a greater need for these more intentional, more purposeful interactions. And I also think that, while it's great to bring people together to have fun, but why not really be more impactful and think about the ROI on your investment and integrate learning? So it's not just we're there to have fun, but there's also an opportunity to work on core learning that you need to help your business grow or pivot or whatever change is going on. And if you look at the world right now, there's so much going on and so many shifts that are taking place in the marketplace.
Yeah.
Now is a great time. Like, people are exhausted.
They're exhausted.
This past week has been exhausting for me.
Yeah, right. What's in store for us next week? Jeez.
Exactly.
And I feel like it's really timely. I feel like more than ever. I really have my eye as well on in-person connections, because I think it's so important for people to come together and talk to each other, learn from each other. That's why I really like doing this show, because I just hope that people can hear your story, take away, advice and learnings. You mentioned pivots. It's two things. My last guest last week, one of the things that the advice that she had for young people was really getting into that in-person office experience as much as you can, because while we all really love working hybrid and remote, it's so valuable to work with other people. The things that you can learn from watching and learning and picking up on cues from other people. So it seems like this is a trend right now that I'm hearing, is that you need to be able to pivot, which you just have talked about, that you've been pivoting, that it's important to connect with others, and that it's important to spend time together. When did you first start? Have you always had an eye on leadership development like this? Was this always part of your expertise?
Yeah. Yes, it has been for some time now. So the past 15 years, I have been developing leadership development programs, DEI programs, a whole range of learning and development, everything from individual contributors to managers and managers of managers and executive teams. So I've been very fortunate in my career to have worked across the leadership development space and also change management and strategic planning as well. So it's really allowed me to be able to think very holistically about the different needs of different levels in an organization, from somebody who's a frontline person or somebody who is perhaps at or also somebody who is at a more analyst or junior role, all the way to all of the levels going to the executive team that's reporting to the board. And so leadership development really allows you to think through what are the learning needs of the organization and how do you align that to the strategic planning goals, perhaps for the next 2 to 3 years. Nowadays, that time is more compressed to months. Sometimes, a strategy might shift or expand or narrow, depending on what's happening in the market. And how do you basically create programs to support the organization's growth or changes in the marketplace? And also, how do you build culture? And how do you do that in a way that's intentional as well?
Yeah, can we let's rewind a little bit and dive into that pathway. You just kind of alluded to the experiences that you've had and the expertise that you've developed over the years, and maybe tell us what were you doing here before you decided to take this turn on this new venture? Give us a little backstory on your career journey.
Wow, my career journey. It's been a lot of pivots, a lot of twists and turns. And I feel like each one has really led me to always continue to fall back on, certain core skills of mine that I've been able to, for lack of a better word, but at times rebrand, refashion myself. But some of the core skills remain the same. So I started my career after college. And by the way, when I was in college, I had a 2.5 year internship at ABC News. So I actually started really in media.
Yeah, I saw that it's at the bottom of your LinkedIn profile,
bottom of my
way
resume.
Down there. Yeah.
I worked at ABC News, and actually my first day was on 9/11, believe it or not.
You're kidding.
Yeah, and they told me, don't come to the office today, come next week. Yeah.
And you were like, great. Yeah, there goes my chance, my
Pretty
opportunity.
Much. So I started there. I started my career in the news, and I realized after 2.5 years, it was not long-term something that I wanted to do. And I pivoted to the nonprofit sector after college, and I was able to work at some pretty well-known international foundations and also nonprofits for 4 years. So I was able to work doing some really interesting work actually on the African continent right out of college. And then after that, 4 years later, I went to business school. And then from business school, I pivoted to consulting. And that's how I ended up doing leadership development work. And so for the last 15 years, I've basically worked at boutique, as well as one of the big four consulting firms doing change management work.
KPMG, right?
KPMG, yes. I was there for 3 years. I did, in the 2.5 years I did, I was in the people and change management group. And then I also worked at a strategy firm called Oliver Wyman Group. And then while I was living in New York and Boston. And then I basically, I had a moment. I burnt out. About 8 years into it, I burned out. And
okay,
so
I'm gonna put a pin in that real quick. The burnout part we're gonna get to. I'll transition to that because that's great. Everybody has that flashpoint moment, but I want to rewind all the way back to you said you knew that news wasn't for you. Did you have sort of an aha moment there as well? Because it's interesting that you went from media to nonprofit and then to business school and then to consulting. So we'll get to the bigger pivot. But what was the micro one at news where you're like, no, not for me? What was it?
It was all the wars that were going on in the early 2000s. And I actually spent some time in Egypt. In 2003, I studied abroad there for a semester. Wow. And I had a moment while I was there. There was this huge demonstration in 2003 in Tahrir Square, which is in the middle of Cairo. Yep. And there were thousands of people there. And I remember when I called my family, they were just asked, did anybody see this? Was it being covered? And they were like, no. And I remember for me, at the time, it was one of those moments where I just started to feel that what I thought the news wasn't exactly what I thought it was, what I wanted it to believe it should be, I guess. So there was a bit of a disconnect for me with what I believed was supposed to be journalism, which is what I was expecting working at a news agency, at a network, and then what I was experiencing. And I remember I did everything from Good Morning America to News One. I moved around at ABC, and then I just was like, this is not for me. And it was because I just felt there was a lack of integrity. And so here we are 20 years later.
Yeah. And then what? Okay. So there's so much. I feel like we're not going to have enough time for me to dive deep into each one of these, but I really want to. But then how about the nonprofit world? When did you decide? What was your moment to know that you wanted to go back to business school?
School, yeah, business school is actually never on my radar. There've been quite a few pivots where each one I really had to take a step back and ask myself, is this what I want to be doing? The nonprofit one, I just got a wonderful opportunity. Because I studied anthropology in college, I also speak multiple languages. I was able to land this job at a foundation. And while I was working there, I got to travel internationally. I got to participate in administering grants for some really interesting programs abroad. And I did that for several years. And then I realized part of the reason I left the nonprofit sector is I felt like things moved too slow for me. That's really, that was a defining decision. It just felt like the pace of change was so slow. I mean, look, I'm looking back now, I appreciate, how policy takes time to develop. Yeah. But when you're in your early 20s and you just have a lot of energy and you want to move quickly, for me, it just felt like, things are moving too slowly here. I need to move faster. And that's how I ended up in consulting.
All right. So you're doing consulting. You do consulting for a while at some significant places, but you kind of get burnt out then, you said, and you just, you have this new sort of aha moment. Yeah. That you're like, okay. And what does that one look like?
Yeah, that one was perhaps me flying a little bit too close to the sun. Probably is the best way to think about it. Okay. After about, I think it was maybe 5 or 6, 7 years, relentless traveling, and I was traveling both domestically and internationally. I basically, in a 1-week period, had 3 near-death experiences, literally in 1 week. And they were all related to me constantly traveling from one place to the other. And by the third one, and in that incident, I was driving in New York, and I was getting off an exit into to Queens, which is where I was living at the time. Okay. It was close to the airport, which was part of the reason I was living there in the first place.
Because you were traveling so much, you were always going somewhere.
I was literally 15 minutes from the airport because I traveled so much.
Yeah.
I almost drove into an exit barrier.
Oof.
And I would have died on impact. And it was the third incident, right? There were several other crazy ones before that. Exactly.
So that was like strike 3. That was your sign from the universe. Number 3, you're like, okay.
Right. Like it should have taken 3 signs, but unfortunately it did. Yeah. And it wasn't that. After that, I handed in my resignation the following Monday. That happened on Friday. I resigned on Monday. And then I resigned, and then immediately I was like, I need to get out of New York City. I need time to just take a beat. And
so did you resign without sort of any backup plan? You were just like, I just know I got to pull the plug here and then I'll figure it out afterwards?
There was no backup plan. I was like, I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
In twist to the story, interestingly enough, I booked a wonderful retreat upstate New York, and I was really excited to go. And then I got a call from another company that I'd been wanting to work at for years. And when they called me for the exact opportunity I'd been interested in, I would have had to either leave my retreat early or just not go at all, so that I could go on this job interview. And I remember at the time when I asked for a little bit of flexibility, I was like, it wasn't a when, and I was like, I need a few days. Can I, come to the interview next week? And they were like, no, it has to be this week. And I tried my best to negotiate, but they were not willing to budge. And at that moment, I knew if I just jumped right back into the workforce, that things were not going to get any better for me at the pace that I was going, because I was always moving so quickly. So I said no. Even though I'd been really interested in the job, I chose my health and my well-being.
And you chose retreats, which is
chose the retreat.
Full circle. Here you are still doing, or going back to, I guess, that retreat, right?
I've gone, well, during the pandemic, there was a bit of a pause at the height of it, but I've gone on a retreat every year for the last 10 years, because the first one I went on that really put me on the path of starting my own business, and then where I am now, it was exactly 10 years. This time, 10 years ago, it was in March.
Were these like professional retreats or personal ones?
This was a personal one, and this was one where it was really it was a special program. It was the organization. The place is called Omega. Okay. And it's in Rhinebeck, New York. It's in upstate New York. And they had a special program for overworked people like myself, literally.
Overworked anonymous kind of thing?
Literally. And it was, when I Googled it, and it came up, and I was like, what? And then I signed up, I got accepted, and it was a program to take a beat for a week. Yeah. And it was a beautiful place up in the woods. I was in nature, and for the first time, I remember I walked these long trails every single day, multiple times a day. I did yoga, I meditated, I rested for the first time, and my nervous system for the first time was actually starting to calm down. And it was while I was there, I realized that knowing who I am and that I tend to move quickly, I enjoy working. And so I knew that I needed to have a way to be able to constantly reset myself and to also pause. And so it was after that experience, I decided that this is something that I need to integrate into my life professionally. And then I've been very fortunate over the years to also introduce it to organizations that I've worked with, even though I was consulting with them for something else, but then there was an interest in retreats. And so that's been really what it's been at the heart and the root of this pivot. Is just I've noticed there's a desire and an interest for it.
Okay, so you decide though, but I guess having that moment where retreats are important to you is one thing, but then I guess deciding that you're going to make a business of it is another. So are you excited? Because this is relatively new. When did you start this venture? How soon? How recently?
Yeah, Simetras, I launched it in December. So It's about, almost 4.5 months, 5 months. But listen, in my previous company, I was already facilitating retreats, helping teams organize them. Except this time, this is much more hands-on, where Simetras is much more involved in the logistics and operations. Because what I found when I would just go in as a facilitator in the past is sometimes, for example, the space that I would go into wasn't the best, and it would actually impede or make it very difficult to facilitate effectively because the space wasn't that productive or that useful. And so I found that, being more involved in that part of the process is very important. And so it's something that, with Simetras, we both facilitate, but also we will help with the logistics and the operations to ensure that it's the right type of space, as well as, we don't have food being delivered at the wrong time, and so it's just creating a lot of disruptions in the flow of the actual retreat.
Yeah, so you're able to take all of it's a great approach. You're able to take all of the lessons learned, all the different times you've done it, package it up, use a best practice to really put something meaningful in place. You know what organizations need. You know what's effective, what works, what doesn't work, right?
I do. I mean, I've been doing this work for such a long time now, both from the learning and development space, as well as understanding, many of the challenges that executives face, alongside as well, how do you bring the challenges the executives are facing, challenges that are happening in the organization. You bring sometimes different types of people who don't interact as much as they should together. to sometimes develop new solutions, right, to a particular problem. And then how do you do that in an environment that's inspiring? How do you do that in an environment that really gets people out of their day-to-day, humdrum like activities, right? To really step aside. And I think that's often one of the biggest benefits to this is that we are able to really get people to think very differently and to ask deeper questions and to challenge more assumptions when they're not in their typical environment.
Is it a hard sell for you to go to organizations and say, hey, you should put resources towards retreat, here are the benefits? Or do you find that typically they're like, hey, we have this carved out, we're just looking for the best facilitator?
Yeah. So what I've been finding actually very recently when I was in Vegas, I had a chance to speak to multiple chief HR officers and chief people officers. A lot of what I've been told is they already know there's value in this. A lot of organizations are already doing it, especially smaller organizations that are 200 to 300 people. What's happening is many of them, they know they have to meet at least once or twice a year. Right. And also the executive needs to meet, the executive team needs to meet, as well as sometimes the entire organization may need to meet, or specific teams may need to meet. And I think what I thought was what's been interesting in how they've been doing it is some organizations have actually outsourced it to marketing, which I think is very interesting because it's less when that is done, and it's always a fun event. And that's great. But that means it's also less connected and integrated to the actual business. And so there's a missed opportunity when you're not connecting people being together with how do we make sure we get as much impact out of this as possible, and how do we make sure we actually, if there's something that we need to work on, we actually use the time to do that. So it's not just, we're going to go to the beach or we're going to the yoga, but there's actually learning integrated into. So I live in Miami. You'd be surprised, maybe you're not surprised, but the number of times like companies will reach out to me and they want to do some sort of, they're doing some sort of a retreat. And usually the learning is like an afterthought, right? They've thought of all these other things beforehand, going on a cruise, like renting a yacht,
parasailing or snorkeling or something. Yeah.
Kayaking, canoe, all that stuff. And then they're like, we don't have any money left for a facilitator and I'm just like, well, then you're just having a nice vacation and that's fine, but call it what it is. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Milka, with all of this, so I mean, running your own business is tough. You said you're not afraid to work. It's you've had to press pause and make sure you're not overworking yourself. But there's talk of entrepreneurship being good for moms. And as a mom, is it good? Do you appreciate the flexibility? I go, what intrigues you most about entrepreneurship? Is it the flexibility and that you can work on your terms? Or is it just that idea of creating something and building it yourself? Is it a little bit of all of it? What are your thoughts on that?
All of the above. I knew. So I actually, when I got my MBA, when I was thinking about going to business school, I knew I was going to eventually become an entrepreneur and work independently. And so that's the reason why I went to Babson. The school is known for entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Because I really wanted to make sure I built those muscles. And so I love the flexibility. And that was one of my big reasons is like the freedom, the flexibility. I have more control over my time. And my mom, actually, I grew up with a mom who was always a business owner since I was born. My mother was never working for anybody.
She modeled it for you. You saw it.
So she did. And so I was able to see it at a young age, and I was able to see the highs and the lows, right? The good moments as well as the challenging moments and the peaks and the valleys that comes with it.
Yeah.
And so I've been able to take on probably more risk than most people can take on because I grew up with it. But I also know that my mother, because she is a business owner, she could go away for months at a time and the business is still running. And so that's something that I've always valued.
Speaking of valuing something, I love that story. And, you mentioned going to, good business school. You've got a good education. You went to some really good schools. And I guess I just wonder, that's something I always like to ask my guests, I guess what were your experiences like there? And what college advice do you have for young people? Is it worth it? Should young people still be going to school? What do you see in peers and professionals out there? What about grad school? I mean, there's all these questions. So maybe give me a little background on what's your take on it all.
That's a really tough one for me
How come?
right now, because I feel like, if I was talking to you 10 years ago or 15 years ago, I probably would say something very different than what I'm going to say now.
So you've had a little bit of a pivot, a mind change.
Yeah, my mind has shifted a lot. And also knowing the investments that I made, the debt that I went into to go to school.
Yeah.
And I, sometimes ask myself, was it worth it? I still don't have a concrete answer to that. What I can tell you is that, I'll start here. When I think about, at Columbia, what's going on right now at that institution, I'm struggling with that because I find it very shameful. And as a student there, and as someone who actually almost went into academia, believe it or not, I've had to think, no.
That would have been one other thing on your resume.
Well, I almost got a PhD in anthropology. And wow. I mean, I'm happy I didn't, quite frankly, because, and it's not specific to anthropology, but when I look now at the state of academia, and what it's supposed to do, right? It's about inquiry. It's about being able to share ideas, have different opinions, and curiosity, and the ability to have conversations. And now it's like, oh, we can't do these things anymore. And not only that, but students are being, we know what's going on.
We know what's going on.
Yeah, and so it's a very challenging time, I think, and so I think for me now, quite frankly, I think I'll say this: university, like going to college, makes sense, or even graduate school makes sense if you need to go, right? If you are very sure of a profession that you want to have, and the profession requires getting a degree, by all means, if you're going to become a medical doctor or an engineer, or you want to become a lawyer and you have to go to law school, yes, by all means, get these terminal degrees, go to college. However, I think if you are still trying to figure it out, I don't know that I would recommend that's, at 18, that's the first step. You need to go right after high school. I would actually suggest a lot of young people take a year or two off, take a gap year if you can. Yeah. Like seriously, take some time and go figure yourself out, because it's too expensive to go figure yourself out with the cost that's attached to going to college, and given what's going on right now and these universities. So.
Yeah, I love that idea of going and taking a beat and going. And I would say, I would add to that, it's like, and go work in a restaurant or go work in retail. Like for me, that is one of the best, social experiences, social and professional experiences. You learn to be an entrepreneur. You learn to interact with people. You learn pressure. You learn working with a team. There's so much that comes along with, I think, working in a fast-paced restaurant environment.
Yeah. So
that's good advice.
Normalize that again. Like people, I mean, I know they do it a lot in Europe, but it's never been a thing here in the U.S. So, and I also think too, like we see how there's a lot of young people who are, they're killing it on social media, and I wouldn't have thought years ago I would have said this.
I was going to say, it's like, dang, you said it.
I said it. And some parents are probably going to get really mad at me. But if you have a passion for, for something that you're doing that actually allows you to also be able to make a living, I'm not saying let that be the, end and be all of your life, but, it seems to be the direction the market's going anyway. It's already been going in that direction. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, whatever the path was 20 years ago, I don't know that it's still the path for everyone now. I think maybe for a smaller group of people college might make sense. But for other people, I think looking at a range of different types of opportunities you can explore before going and taking on this huge financial burden so you can go explore yourself while you're in college.
That's good advice. I think we're in a tough time as parents right now, right? Because my kids are 18 and 20, and we're definitely, my wife and I, we have the college backgrounds and master's degrees. And so for us you're right. You look back like that was the way, that was the expectation. But admittedly, things are changing. Were you, I guess when you look back, were you really an intentional career builder? You alluded to a little bit that you went to business school, you knew you wanted to be an entrepreneur, but and that maybe you were going to go into academia, so maybe you've already answered this, but did you know it's like, I'm putting in the building blocks in place, I'm getting the degree, then I'm going to take the internship, then I'm going to get, did you have a vision for this all, or has it just all still falling into place?
It's still falling into place. I didn't have a vision for this all because I feel I'm a very curious person, and there are a lot. Look, I could have probably had 5 other careers, to be really honest with you.
And you may still, right?
Well, I don't know about that. Initially I wanted to be a lawyer, and then I wanted to become an anthropologist, and so now something like maybe I should have become an engineer. And so I know, because I'm a curious person, and I love to solve problems, and the reason I went to business school for 2 reasons, and I'm going to tell you why. One, because I remember my dad. He was like, "Look, you studied anthropology undergrad. Great for you. You got to do what you love to do. Now go get a more practical.
Go get a degree that will get you money." Yes. Right?
He told me that.
Wow.
Both him and my uncle. They were very blunt about it. And then the second reason was I also knew that I like to solve problems. And one of the things, my former mentor, she was a lawyer, and I was considering law school. And she was like, "Don't become a lawyer." And I was like, "Why not?" And her basic rationale was the law is very good at putting restrictions and parameters and telling you the things that you cannot do. And I had to sit with that. I sat with that for a few days. Because the law is for the most part, it's written. Yes, there's, yes, it can evolve and changes can occur, but there are certain parameters that you're working with. Whereas with the business environment, there's a lot more flexibility, a lot more creativity. You don't want a lot of creativity in the law, probably.
That's interesting.
The law.
In business, especially as an entrepreneur, you're building, you're creating, it's additive. Whereas the law is sort of restrictive. It's like, these are the barriers, and I'm here to know what those barriers are, where they fall.
And operate within them. Exactly.
Yeah, interesting.
And then her recommendation was like, hire a lawyer one day. You don't need to become a lawyer.
Yeah.
And it was good advice. And I'm actually happy I took it, because I also feel that business school going to business school, and also the school that I went to, it really has given me one of the big things I feel like I got out of going to business school was actually working in a lot of teams and having to be able to pivot quickly and create new teams. And I remember every class we had to do a presentation on the fly, right?
Yeah.
Within 10, 15 minutes, you come up. And so I got really good believe it or not, most of the people who were normally on my teams were often engineers, and I was the most well-spoken out of all of us. So I often had to explain things to people.
Were you often the presenter?
I was always the presenter. Yeah,
same.
Exactly. Presenting things that I barely knew that much about. Didn't really even matter. But it was convincing.
Yeah, and what's funny is I remember telling my group in grad school, I'm like, you guys, I feel like I'm not getting it. I don't necessarily get the finance part. I'm not the technical expert. And one of my peer, my group members, he's like, "Derek," he's like, "that's okay." He's like, we envy you because you're the one that you can express, you get up there, you're the storyteller, and those are things we can't do. And that was a nice moment for me. I'm like, okay, so I play a role here, because I was really feeling like, okay, I'm not an MBA guy, person. And they're like, "No, you're what we need as well." So it sounds like you were in that same.
It was similar. They were always pushing me to the front to go present after the first few times they would see me present. And so I fell into that role often. And then it was in business school that I took my first consulting class, and I loved it. Because so much of it was being very curious, asking good questions and problem solving. And that's when I knew I wanted to go into consulting. It was while I was in graduate school.
Did we get through the 2 reasons? One was your dad and your uncle said you need to go get another degree that'll make you money. And then what was the second reason?
The second one was my mentor, who was a lawyer, who told me, "Don't become a lawyer."
That's right. Okay. All right.
It was her idea.
Well, let's look backwards here. We got a few minutes left here, Milka, and there's so much we can still talk about. But I want to get to this. If we look back, are there you can choose your path here? Any memorable failures that you want to talk about, or that you think you want to highlight? Or looking back, is there somebody that really helped you, or something that helped you evolve and progress, or that fueled the success that you've had?
Yeah. When I look back, yeah, I don't see anything as a failure. I feel like everything has added to the next thing and the next step and the next step. And I've been able to evolve as I've needed to evolve into different roles. And so I really see them as been like just opportunities that I've had to grow, and I've had to step up one way or another. Going back from, starting my career in the newsroom to where I am now, I've just constantly shifted. And I would say if there are two things that I think have been kind of central to that is I realized that actually I'm really good at pivoting. I'm good at just being able to make shifts and start over. Mm-hmm. And one of the biggest lessons I feel like I've learned is to, if I can quote Aaliyah, who said, if at first you don't succeed, dust yourself off and try again, right? So you get back up every time you fall. And that's been one of the biggest lessons. So even if I fall or I make a misstep, I don't even see that as a failure. I just see that as, oh yeah, okay, I've learned this. So I feel like each phase of my career, there is something I've had to learn. And when I've learned it, I've been able to graduate to the next phase or whatever other thing that I'm learning. So even now with this is being my third business, and I'm doing things much more intentionally than before, because the first time I was just throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what works. Now I actually do know what works. And know a lot of it is also, a matter of timing and patience comes with that. But I do feel that it's been helpful. And I think the last thing for me is I'm also a person of faith. And I feel like for me, that's something that's allowed me to do this work, to be able to, not rely on just the idea of stability coming from a paycheck that, you get from a company. So I keep that. That's something that's important to me, like my faith. And so it just allows me to just always stay hopeful no matter the situation.
That's good. That's great. That's good advice. And I love just sort of that growth mindset and just your perspective that it's always like a moving forward, never really taking time to wallow in anything. It's just okay, cool. Learn that, fall down, get up. Like you said, dust yourself off and go back out there. How do you apply that to people today? Is there anything that worries you about young professionals today? Or is there, and what has you excited about the youth of today?
I want to start with the more positive one.
Let's do it.
I'm excited for them because I feel like they have much more flexibility to build and to be creative and to also be able to make a living out of that, right? And I think a lot more than we had 20 years ago. I even think about, when I was starting my first business 10 years ago, so many of the tools that exist now, they didn't. And it was so hard because you have to do everything yourself or hire a ton of people. And then the cost was really high to even get started. While that barrier to entry into the market has been reduced significantly, I think, in the last few years because technology is so much more accessible and it's also so much cheaper now than it was 10 or 20 years ago. So I think that in itself has made it, there's a lot more opportunity to try different things and go different paths. There isn't just one path to success. As we see, there's many different paths to success. And I feel like the democratization of technology has created space for that. Now, what concerns me a bit, and I don't know that it's necessarily their fault, but I do think part of it is the spirit of our times, right? It's the zeitgeist that we're in, that there's best way to say this. When we were children, I feel like people used to say, sticks and stones will hurt my bones, but names will never hurt me. But I feel like now it's kind of the other way around, where I think for a lot of younger people now, there's, while on the one hand, I think Gen Z and younger millennials, I think there's some of them, like there's a level of emotional fluency. I didn't say this, intelligence, fluency.
Okay. Oh, fluency, interesting. Yeah.
That many of them have. They have language to speak of their emotions, I think, more than I think older generations do, which is, I think, wonderful. Like they can, like, even with my daughter, I see that. Like she's so in touch with like being able to express her feelings and how she's feeling and have different words that I didn't have at her age, right?
Yeah, yeah.
However, I do feel like there's a fragility that unfortunately, and I feel like a part of it has been, look, you look at our news cycle, you look at the world we're living in,
yeah.
The insecurity is never ending. And you can't even, kids have to worry about, shootings at school, mass shoot. I mean, so when you think of all these things, we can all appreciate how that's impacted the sense of insecurity that probably exists in a lot of younger children or younger professionals as well, because the world has been like a very insecure place for them for a long time. Yeah. So I do feel that it is something where like strengthening their emotional fortitude, because life is hard. There's a lot of ups and downs. And so strengthening that and really taking the time to cultivate that, I think it's something that generationally, I think for Gen Z, it's going to be an opportunity in the next years to really develop that, because I'm the next 4 years. I mean, it's going to be tough. We got to get through it.
Yeah, it's going to be tough.
Exactly. We got to get through it.
Yeah, I think that's good. But you're hopeful. It sounds like you're hopeful.
I am. I am hopeful, because like the fact that I think there's the emotional fluency, that there is an understanding of it. Now it's the building the muscles, right? The strength, like just strengthening themselves to know that, look, so much of life's come with these ups and downs. These things are cyclical. This too shall pass, right? And things won't stay bad forever. And there will be a better day. That, it's not always going to be dark.
I love that outlook. And I think, so looking forward then, we'll wrap with this. Milka, what's next for you as you build your new company, and maybe wrap it up in a form of, maybe advice for others who are considering, like you mentioned, like you've done multiple times, a career pivot, or who wants to go out on an entrepreneurial adventure, or who's thinking about going to college, going to a good school or graduate school, or who's writing a book. Is there another book in your future, by the way?
Yes. Actually, I want to write a novel, which is completely different.
Fiction? Yes. Nonfiction? What do you write?
Yes, I actually started it years ago. I just haven't finished it yet.
Okay.
So it is more like a historical novel. So that is something that's back. It's back in my mind again. I'm like, I actually want to actually do something with this.
One of my guests a few weeks ago, she took a sabbatical. She's in Portugal right now writing a fictional novel. I think historical fiction is what she's writing. So there's that reset moment. But so that's going to be on your resume soon. But what else?
Any advice that I would give? I'm a bit leery to give advice still. Although I'm a consultant and this is what I do all the time. But given the chaos of the last couple of weeks, it's the first thing that I said earlier, just being able to get back up again, when you fall, when you make a misstep. And also developing that emotional, developing your emotional intelligence. Also developing. I'm reluctant to use the word resilience because I feel like we overuse it, but it is something that being able to just bounce back up, and also as regards to school and career, I no longer believe there's a direct path. I don't. I think there are many different paths that can get you somewhere better, to a different future. And I think it's really know who you are. That's at the center of it. And also you will change. The 18-year-old you will not be the 28 you, and it's not going to be your 38-year-old self, right?
100%.
So you're going to evolve and you're going to change, and give yourself grace. This is where you are at 18, and being able to be present, but also being mindful of, as you go through these phases, your needs are going to change. You may not have a lot of financial needs at 18 because your parents are taking care of you, but at 28, we know that you will, as well as
Yeah.
38. You
Yeah.
have to be more self-sufficient. So balancing making decisions that honor your present, where you are today, as well as where you know you need to be 10, 15, or 20 years from now. So you don't look back with a lot of regret, I wish I had done these things. And one big thing, and people told me this is advice that young people don't seem to take it, but if you can, start investing early.
Yes.
Compound interest is a thing. Start early. Don't wait until you're in your 40s.
Oh, so true.
Start early. Even if you're just putting away $20 a week, you can spare that. You can spare your Starbucks coffee that probably costs you $20 like every 2 or 3 days.
Yep.
And you will be surprised long term, like that money can become a cushion, because that's what's helped me over the years to make some of these pivots is, always stashing away some money. It gives you flexibility, so you're not always living hand to mouth.
Yeah, that's great advice. You're paying you're investing in yourself, and I put it that you paid yourself in the past. You're paying yourself now. Somebody did, or you did, and then you're paying yourself now. You're working for now. There's a future you that needs to be paid as well, and that may or may not be guaranteed. So it's your job right now to protect yourself and invest in yourself. So really good advice. Milka, thank you so much. So many good takeaways in here. I love your optimistic perspective, and you're going to do great with this new venture. We'll put all the links to how to find you, how to find the company, how to book a retreat, whatever it is.
Yes.
We'll put it all in the show notes. So yeah, if you want a meaningful retreat and something great and something strategic that's going to help build leadership and really bring your team together, find Milka Milliance on LinkedIn. We'll put your website on there. But can't thank you enough. Thanks for being here.
You're very welcome, Derek. Thank you.
Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the show. If you like what you heard, be sure to check back weekly, subscribe to the show, and if you want to be featured on the show, come hit us up at theunderswell.com. We'd love to hear from you.